Sarah ran a hand through the cool, shimmering water, a sigh of pure contentment escaping her lips. The meticulously kept backyard pool was her sanctuary, her personal slice of paradise in the otherwise sterile, cookie-cutter landscape of the Cypress Grove estates. Every tile, every ripple, every perfectly manicured shrub surrounding it was a testament to her hard work, her dream of a private oasis finally realized after years of scrimping and saving. The scent of chlorine mingled with the sweet aroma of jasmine from the climbing vines, a fragrant barrier against the outside world. This was hers. The first tremor of disruption had been subtle, almost imperceptible. A stray pool noodle, bright yellow and undeniably foreign, bobbing innocently near the deep end. Sarah had dismissed it, attributing it to a gust of wind or perhaps a new neighbor's toy accidentally flung over the fence. Then came the faint, high-pitched laughter, distant yet distinct, filtering over the impeccably trimmed hedge. She'd tried to ignore it, telling herself it was just children playing somewhere else in the sprawling suburban development. But the laughter grew closer, bolder, accompanied by splashes that were definitely not her own. One scorching Tuesday afternoon, as Sarah floated languidly on a raft, the sound of a gate creaking shattered her peace. Her eyes snapped open, a jolt of adrenaline surging through her. Standing by the back gate, which led directly to the community's manicured greenbelt, and should have been locked from her side, was a woman she vaguely recognized from HOA meetings. Brenda. Her hair was pulled back in a severe ponytail, and her floral sundress seemed oddly formal for a casual visit. Behind her, 2 children, no older than 8, clutched brightly colored towels, their eyes already fixed on the glistening pool. "Oh, hello there, neighbor." Brenda's voice was saccharine, dripping with a manufactured charm that set Sarah's teeth on edge. "Lovely day for a swim, isn't it?" Sarah, still half submerged, pushed herself upright, her brows furrowed. "Brenda? Is there something I can help you with?" Brenda tooted, stepping further into the yard as if invited. Her children, without a word, dropped their towels and began to edge towards the shallow end, already shedding their flip-flops. "Oh no, dear. Just here for a refreshing dip. The kids have been cooped up all morning, and with the community pool still undergoing maintenance, this is simply perfect." She gestured grandly at Sarah's pool, as if it were a public park facility. Sarah's mouth went dry. "The community pool. Brenda, this isn't the community pool. This is my private backyard pool." Brenda's smile didn't waver, but her eyes hardened, losing their faux warmth. Now, Sarah. Let's not be difficult. It's clearly accessible from the Greenbelt, and as a resident of Cypress Grove Estates, I have every right to utilize communal amenities. We all pay our HOA fees, don't we?" She leaned in conspiratorially, as if sharing a profound truth. "I even made sure to use the gate code I borrowed from a previous resident. So thoughtful of them to leave it in the welcome packet." Sarah stared aghast. "You broke into my yard? And you think my private pool is a communal amenity, because you pay HOA fees?" Her voice rose, indignation warring with sheer disbelief. "Brenda, the HOA covers common areas, the clubhouse, the tennis courts, the walking paths. My pool, my home, my private property is explicitly excluded from that." Brenda waved a dismissive hand, her children now daringly dipping their toes into the water, giggling. "Oh, technicalities, technicalities. It's a pool, darling. We're all neighbors. And frankly, with a pool this size, it's a bit selfish to keep it all to yourself, wouldn't you say? Especially when the children are suffering in this heat." "Selfish." Sarah climbed out of the pool, dripping wet, her voice a low, dangerous growl. "Brenda, get your children out of my pool, and you need to leave my property. Immediately. Or I'll call the police." Brenda scoffed, crossing her arms. "The police? Over a little splash? Don't be ridiculous. I'm merely exercising my rights as a homeowner. I'm quite certain the HOA board would agree that limiting access to a perfectly good swimming facility, when the official one is out of order, is rather unneighborly." Her children, emboldened by their mother's defiance, were now wading deeper, splashing each other. Furious, Sarah grabbed her phone. "You want to talk HOA? Fine. I'll talk to the HOA. But first, you're leaving." She started dialing, her finger hovering over the screen. Brenda, seeing the serious intent in Sarah's eyes, finally relented, though with a theatrical sigh and an exaggerated roll of her eyes. "Fine, fine. Honestly, some people. Children, out. Mommy has to deal with a most unreasonable person." She herded her giggling, reluctant children out of the pool, shooting Sarah a look that. Brenda's furious pounding on the back gate rattled the very foundations of Sarah's momentary peace. The shrill demands to open up cut through the placid afternoon air like a rusty saw. Sarah, still seated by the pool with her half-empty glass of iced tea, didn't flinch. Her small smile only widened slightly. She took another deliberate sip, savoring the cool liquid, before slowly rising and making her way to the gate, her movements unhurried, almost languid. This was not a retreat. This was an audience. "Sarah Jensen, open this gate right now." Brenda's face, contorted with rage, was barely visible through the slats, a crimson blotch against the greenbelt beyond. Her voice, usually artificially sweet or sharply dismissive, was now raw with indignation. Sarah reached the gate, but didn't open it. She simply leaned against the cool metal, her arms crossed, an almost serene expression on her face. "Yes, Brenda? Is there something you need?" Her tone was maddeningly calm. "Is there something I need?" Brenda shrieked, pressing her face closer to the slats, her eyes bulging. "You had the audacity to charge my children to swim in what you know is community property. $5 per child. Do you have any idea how outrageous that is?" "Outrageous?" Sarah raised an eyebrow, feigning surprise. "Brenda, we had this conversation. This is my private property. My pool. You seem to be under the impression that because you pay HOA fees, you're entitled to use it. Since you insist on treating it as a community amenity, I merely put in place a standard usage fee. Even the actual community pool charges for guest passes, doesn't it? Consider your children my guests." Brenda spluttered, momentarily speechless. "Guests? They're residents. They're children. You can't just make up rules like this." "Oh, but I can," Sarah countered, her voice dropping a notch, the steel beneath the velvet now unmistakable. "Because this is my home, and on my property I set the rules. $5 per child per swim. It's clearly posted." She gestured vaguely towards a small, laminated sign she'd quickly put up near the gate that morning, neatly stating, "Private property. Pool use. $5 per child / per swim. No exceptions." Brenda squinted at the sign, her face a mask of disbelief, then erupted again. "You actually put up a sign? Are you insane? I'm calling the HOA. I'm calling the board. This is harassment. This is extortion." "You're welcome to call whoever you like, Brenda," Sarah said, a small, genuine smile finally gracing her lips. "I've already spoken with Carol at the HOA. She reminded me that my private property is indeed, well, private, and that enforcement regarding trespassers falls to local law enforcement. Since you insist on pushing the community property narrative, I simply provided a path for that community use. A paid path, of course." Brenda's jaw worked, her eyes narrowing to slits. "You think this is funny? You think you're so clever? This isn't over, Sarah. Not by a long shot. You'll regret this. You'll regret this deeply." She spun on her heel, her floral dress swirling around her, and stomped away, muttering darkly. Sarah watched her go, the adrenaline finally starting to recede, leaving behind a quiet satisfaction. This felt right. It was a bizarre, almost ludicrous solution, but it was her solution, and it had the unexpected bonus of thoroughly irritating Brenda. The next few days were an uneasy truce. The banging on the gate stopped. The anonymous notes, for a time, ceased. Sarah found herself relaxing more by the pool, the fear of intrusion lessened, replaced by a sense of mischievous victory. Her friends, who had been there for the $5 policy announcement, found it hilarious. "You're a genius, Sarah," her friend Maria had laughed, clinking glasses. "She won't know what hit her." But Brenda Albright was not one to admit defeat quietly. Sarah knew that. And the calm was merely the eye of the storm. A week later, a formal-looking envelope with the HOA letterhead appeared in Sarah's mailbox. Her heart sank slightly. She knew this was coming. Inside was a tersely worded letter from the HOA management, not Brenda. It stated, in official-sounding legalese, that while Ms. Jensen's private property rights were acknowledged, the establishment of a monetary fee for pool usage, particularly in a manner that could be perceived as soliciting or operating a business without proper permits within a residential zone, may be in violation of Cypress Grove Estates covenants, conditions, and restrictions, CCRs, and local ordinances. It requested her immediate cessation of the pool usage fee and a meeting with the HOA board to discuss the matter further. Sarah reread the letter, a knot tightening in her stomach. Brenda had gone to the board, and they, ever keen to avoid any perceived liabilities, were taking her seriously. Soliciting a business? That was a stretch, but she could see the angle. The silence that followed Sarah's declaration at the HOA meeting was more deafening than any of Brenda's previous shrieks. Brenda, utterly blindsided, could only stare, her face a mask of furious disbelief. The board members, meanwhile, shifted uncomfortably, recognizing the legal and emotional trap Brenda had unwittingly sprung on herself. As Sarah walked out of the stuffy room, leaving Brenda sputtering, a fragile sense of victory mingled with a deeper, unsettling exhaustion. She had won this round, but the war, she knew, was far from over. The next morning, Sarah was up early, energized by a new sense of purpose. She meticulously filled out the architectural review application for the 6-foot privacy fence, choosing a design that was both sturdy and aesthetically pleasing, ensuring it would meet all HOA guidelines. She attached samples of the weatherproof paint, a muted sage green that would indeed blend seamlessly with the greenbelt's natural tones, as she'd promised. Her hand didn't tremble as she dropped the envelope into the HOA's suggestion box. Instead, there was a firm resolve in her movements. Later that day, she called a contractor, a local company with an excellent reputation. The estimate was steep, a chunk of her savings she hadn't anticipated spending, but the cost of her peace of mind now outweighed any financial hesitation. "I need a 6-foot privacy fence along my entire back border, facing the greenbelt," she explained, her voice firm. "As soon as possible." The contractor, a burly man named Frank, visited that afternoon, measuring and sketching, his no-nonsense attitude a welcome contrast to the HOA's bureaucratic waffle. "Nice pool," Frank grunted, peering over the existing low hedge. "Why the big fence all of a sudden?" Sarah simply smiled, a tight, weary expression. "Privacy. And peace." Frank nodded, a knowing glint in his eye. "Say no more, ma'am. Happens all the time in these communities. Neighbors." He stressed the word with an inflection that spoke volumes. The architectural committee's approval came back within the week, surprisingly swift. Perhaps the HOA board, having witnessed Brenda's tirade, was keen to facilitate anything that might quell the escalating neighborhood drama. The letter was formal, concise, and gave Sarah the green light. Brenda, however, was not idly standing by. The day the first stakes were driven into the ground, marking the perimeter for the fence, she appeared. Sarah watched from her kitchen window as Brenda, dressed in an immaculate white tennis outfit, though Sarah had never seen her on the tennis courts, marched across the greenbelt, her face set in a grim line. She confronted Frank, the contractor, who was supervising his crew. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" Brenda demanded, her voice carrying across Sarah's yard. Frank, a man accustomed to dealing with various types of homeowner drama, merely looked up, unperturbed. "Building a fence, ma'am. Got the permits, got the approval from the HOA. All above board." "This is an outrage," Brenda declared, gesticulating wildly towards Sarah's house. "This is destroying the beauty of the greenbelt. My view." Sarah, who had braced herself for this, walked out, a faint smile playing on her lips. "Your view, Brenda? Funny, I seem to remember you claiming my backyard was community property. I'm simply making sure there's no further confusion." Brenda whirled on her. "You think this is clever, Sarah? You think you've won? You've just made yourself the most hated person in this neighborhood. Everyone thinks you're selfish, elitist, building a wall to keep people out." "I'm building a wall to keep trespassers out, Brenda," Sarah corrected calmly. "And to protect my private property. Something, apparently, you and your children struggle to understand." She turned back to Frank. "Just make sure it's sturdy, Frank." "Very sturdy." Brenda huffed, glaring daggers at Sarah, then at the nascent fence line. "You'll be sorry, Sarah. Believe me. This isn't the end." She stomped off, her crisp white tennis shoes kicking up divots in the manicured lawn of the greenbelt. The fence construction became a spectacle. Day by day, the sturdy wooden panels rose, transforming the open, accessible border into an impenetrable wall. Neighbors walked their dogs by, some gawking openly, others offering Sarah sympathetic nods, and a few, clearly aligned with Brenda, shooting her disapproving glances. Sarah tried to ignore them, focusing on the satisfying thud of hammers and the rising sense of security the new structure promised. But Brenda's promised sorrow came in more subtle, insidious forms. The anonymous notes returned, now not just tucked under her door but pasted onto the fence itself, during the night. "No one likes a snob," one read. "A wall won't make you friends," said another. Sarah found herself constantly checking the fence line, ripping down the offending notes, the initial satisfaction of the fence. The acrid smell of the paint stripper hung heavy in the air, a physical manifestation of Brenda's malice. Sarah stood by her new fence, staring at the bubbling, ruined paint, the exposed wood crying out in protest. Her heart, which had been pounding with a mix of fury and disbelief, now settled into a cold, hard rhythm. David Albright, sprayer in hand, looked like a deer caught in headlights, his face pale with a dawning horror. Brenda, however, maintained her chilling, unhinged smirk, a triumphant gleam in her eyes that spoke of pure, unadulterated spite. "Just helping you maintain that natural aesthetic, Sarah." Brenda called out again, her voice still dripping with mock sweetness. "Wouldn't want that fence to look too new, now, would we?" Sarah didn't respond with a shout or a plea or even a visible tremor. Instead, she took out her phone. Her movements were slow, deliberate, each action imbued with a terrifying calm. She didn't even bother to hide it. With Brenda still watching, Sarah opened her camera app, zoomed in on the ruined section of the fence, and snapped several high-resolution photos, capturing the bubbling paint, the raw wood, and the telltale streaks of the chemical. Then, she panned the camera slightly to include Brenda and a visibly uncomfortable David in the background, their positions undeniable. Brenda's smirk flickered, a tiny crack in her confident facade. David, seeing the phone, visibly recoiled, his face now a sickly shade of green. "What are you doing?" Brenda demanded, her voice losing its edge of glee, replaced by a note of suspicion. Sarah lowered her phone, her gaze meeting Brenda's directly over the damaged fence. Her eyes, usually a warm hazel, were now chips of glacial ice. "I'm gathering evidence, Brenda," she stated, her voice devoid of emotion, a stark contrast to the inferno raging within her. "Evidence of malicious destruction of private property. Vandalism." Brenda scoffed, though a hint of unease now played around her mouth. "Don't be ridiculous. It's just a little paint. It'll wash off." "Paint stripper, Brenda," Sarah corrected, her voice flat. "On a brand new fence. That cost me a significant amount of money. This isn't a little paint. This is criminal damage. And I have you and your husband on camera in the act." She paused, letting that sink in. "And the smell, the chemical residue, will be more than enough to confirm intent." David, finally finding his voice, spoke up, his tone a shaky whisper. Brenda, maybe we should just go. He tried to pull the sprayer away from her, but she clutched it fiercely. Don't be a baby, David. Brenda snapped, but her eyes darted nervously between Sarah and the phone. She's bluffing. The HOA won't care about a little cosmetic alteration. The HOA deals with CCRs, Brenda, Sarah stated. The police deal with crimes. And what you and David have just done is a crime. On my property, where you were trespassing to do it. She pulled up the dial pad on her phone. The non-emergency line first, to get a report filed. Then I'll call my insurance company. They'll want a police report for the damages. Brenda's face drained of color. The mention of insurance and a police report seemed to finally penetrate her thick skin of self-entitlement. This wasn't just another HOA spat. This was real-world, legal trouble. She looked from Sarah's unyielding face to the fence, then to her husband, who was now openly trembling. You wouldn't, Brenda whispered, a desperate plea in her voice. Sarah didn't even dignify it with a direct answer. She simply began to dial, her thumb pressing each number with a cold finality. The sound of the phone ringing on the other end seemed to echo in the sudden, terrified silence of the Greenbelt. Officer Martinez, please, Sarah said into the phone, her voice clear and steady, projecting an air of absolute control. I'd like to report a case of vandalism and criminal trespass at my address, 1234 Cypress Lane. The perpetrators are still on the scene. Brenda's eyes widened in genuine panic. David, without a word, dropped the sprayer, which clattered loudly on the pavement, and began backing away, his face a picture of utter terror. Brenda, let's go, he hissed. Brenda finally snapped out of her stupor. She threw one last venomous glare at Sarah, then turned and half ran after her retreating husband, abandoning the sprayer on the ground. Sarah watched them go, not with triumph, but with a grim resolve. The satisfaction of seeing Brenda's fear was fleeting. The damage to her fence was real. Within 20 minutes, a patrol car pulled up to Sarah's driveway. Officer Ramirez, a young, observant officer, listened patiently as Sarah recounted the events, showing him the photos she'd taken and pointing out the abandoned sprayer. He examined the fence, frowning at the streaks of raw wood. This is pretty clear-cut, ma'am, Officer Ramirez said, making notes in his pad. Malicious destruct. The letter from Cypress Grove Estates' legal department landed on the Albrights' doorstep with the weight of a death sentence. Mandatory sale of their property. The words, stark and unforgiving, were not a threat but a declaration. Brenda Albright, who had always believed herself untouchable within the petty politics of the HOA, felt her world crumble with dizzying speed. David, ever the passive bystander, finally understood the true depth of the chasm his wife's actions had dug. The initial reaction was predictable: outrage. Brenda stormed into the HOA office, demanding to see the board, threatening lawsuits, and accusing them of a conspiracy orchestrated by Sarah. But this time, Carol, the harried administrative assistant, simply pointed to a notice on the wall. All homeowner disputes and legal communications are now handled exclusively by the Cypress Grove Estates legal department. Brenda's usual tactics, her shrill voice and theatrical indignation, found no purchase against the steel door of legal procedure. Her lawyer, a slick, expensive man she'd hired to dismiss Sarah's restraining order, now had a far larger battle on his hands. He explained, in grave tones, that the HOA's CCRs were ironclad regarding egregious behavior that disrupted community harmony and property values. Vandalism, combined with repeated trespass and general harassment, presented an undeniable case. The HOA wasn't merely fining them, they were removing a cancer from their meticulously planned community. The air in the Albright household became thick with recrimination. David, his usual bewildered expression replaced by a simmering resentment, finally confronted Brenda. This is your fault, Brenda. All of it. The kids getting thrown out, the fence, the police, and now we're losing our home. Brenda, for once, didn't have a snappy retort. The reality was setting in, cold and brutal. Their meticulously decorated, perfectly manicured home, the symbol of her status, was being ripped away. The thought of moving, of facing new neighbors without the shield of her established position, was terrifying. The news spread through Cypress Grove estates like wildfire. Whispers followed Brenda everywhere, at the grocery store, in the park, even at the gym where she used to hold court. The bridge club, Maria reported to Sarah, was alight with the drama. Most neighbors, weary of Brenda's entitlement and incessant complaints, felt a grim satisfaction. Others, particularly those Brenda had previously charmed or intimidated, now openly distanced themselves. The snob and elitist labels Brenda had tried to pin on Sarah now clung firmly to her own reputation. For Sarah, life began to shift. The constant vigilance slowly receded. The restraining order, once granted by the court due to the police report and Sarah's extensive documentation, meant Brenda and David couldn't legally come within 100 feet of her property. The fence stood, a silent testament to her resolve, but it no longer felt like a wall of defense, but simply a boundary. Her peace, hard-won and expensive, was returning. Then came a new kind of confrontation, not from Brenda, but from her 2 children. Sarah was tending to her rose bushes near the new fence one afternoon when she heard small voices. She paused, listening. It was Brenda's 2 children, Emily and Josh, perched on their side of the greenbelt, their faces pressed against the fence slats. "Mrs. Jensen?" Emily's voice was small, hesitant. Sarah slowly straightened up, her heart a mix of apprehension and a surprising pang of pity. These were just kids caught in their mother's destructive wake. "Yes, Emily? Are we really moving?" Josh asked, his lower lip trembling. "Mommy's been crying a lot. And Daddy yells all the time." Sarah hesitated, unsure how to respond to such raw vulnerability. This wasn't about the pool or the fence. This was about their family unraveling. I don't know all the details, kids," she said gently. "But sometimes, when people don't respect other people's property or rules, there are consequences." She felt a twinge of guilt, knowing her actions had directly contributed to their distress, yet she also knew Brenda was solely responsible for her choices. Emily sniffled. "But we liked our house, and we wanted to swim in your pool. Mom said it was ours." Sarah knelt by the fence, trying to soften her voice. "Emily, your mom was wrong about that. This is my pool, just like your house is your house. You wouldn't like it if someone just came into your house without asking, would you?" The children looked down, shuffling their feet. The simplicity of the logic seemed to finally penetrate. "I'm sorry we sprayed your fence," Josh mumbled, almost inaudibly. Sarah felt a wave of unexpected emotion. "Thank you, Josh. I appreciate that." She paused. "Look, if you ever want to swim, and your mom gives you permission, and you ask me politely, and you understand it's my property, we can talk ABO." Sarah ushered Jessica and Tom, along with their wide-eyed children, into her living room. The plate of homemade cookies sat untouched on the coffee table as Sarah began to speak, her voice calm but firm, a seasoned storyteller ready to recount a bizarre, infuriating, and ultimately triumphant saga. She didn't sensationalize, didn't exaggerate, she simply laid out the facts, one after another, peeling back the layers of Brenda's entitlement. "It started about 2 months ago," Sarah began, looking directly at Tom and Jessica. "Brenda Albright, the previous owner, believed that because her children could access my backyard through the Greenbelt gate, my private pool was community property. She insisted she had a right to use it simply by paying HOA fees." Jessica's eyebrows shot up. "But it's clearly your private yard. We saw the fence." "Exactly," Sarah affirmed. "I tried to explain, to reason with her. But she persisted, even using a gate code she'd borrowed, to bring her children into my pool without permission." Sarah described the escalating trespass, the dismissive attitude, and the HOA's initial inability to truly curb Brenda's belief. Tom frowned. "That's incredibly brazen." "It was," Sarah agreed. When repeated requests, and even a warning from the HOA, failed to deter her, and her children continued to trespass, I was at my wit's end. That's when I tried a creative deterrent. She paused, a faint smile touching her lips. I put up a sign. $5 per child per swim. Since she insisted it was a community amenity, I figured even community amenities have usage fees. Jessica gasped, then clapped a hand over her mouth to stifle a laugh. Tom chuckled, shaking his head. You charged them? That's brilliant. It certainly got her attention, Sarah continued, the smile widening. But not in the way I'd hoped. Brenda then went to the HOA board, claiming I was running a business out of my home, which is against the CCRs. She explained the tense HOA meeting, where she was forced to retract the fee. But in doing so, I declared my intention to build the 6-foot privacy fence you see now, to eliminate any confusion about property lines. That makes perfect sense, Jessica said, nodding. The privacy is actually a huge plus for us. That's when things really escalated, Sarah said, her voice growing serious again as she recounted the vandalism. Brenda and her husband, David, actually came back and used paint stripper on my brand new fence, in broad daylight. She showed them the photos on her phone, the stark images of the bubbling paint leaving no room for doubt. Both Jessica and Tom stared at the images, horrified. They did that, Tom exclaimed. That's criminal. It was, Sarah confirmed. I called the police, filed a report. My insurance covered the repairs, but the police investigation led to a restraining order against the Albrights for repeated trespass and vandalism. And that, in turn, led to the HOA's final decision. Sarah explained the mandatory sale clause in the CCRs, detailing how Brenda's persistent disregard for rules and community harmony ultimately triggered the most severe consequence. Jessica and Tom listened in stunned silence. When Sarah finished, the air was thick with the weight of the story. Wow, Jessica finally said, her eyes wide. We knew they were odd. Mrs. Albright mentioned her difficult neighbors and that she was forced to sell. But she made it sound like you were the problem. She certainly tried to, Sarah replied, a deep sense of relief washing over her. But the facts and the HOA's actions speak for themselves. I just wanted you to have the full picture, so there's no misunderstanding moving forward. Tom leaned back, a thoughtful expression on his face. Thank you for telling us, Sarah. Honestly, it explains a lot. And it's a relief to know the truth. We're definitely not interested in any community pool claims on private property. He chuckled. Our kids actually already found the community pool, and it's perfectly fine now. A few days later, Sarah found a small, beautifully potted succulent on her doorstep with a card. Thank you for the honesty and clarity. Here's to good neighbors and peaceful yards. Jessica, Tom, Lily, Sam. The following weekend, Sarah was enjoying a quiet morning coffee by her pool. The fence stood tall and serene, her sanctuary restored. The sun warmed her skin, and the only sounds were the gentle lapping of the water and the distant, happy shouts of children from the actual community pool. The phone buzzed. It was Maria. Guess what I just heard? Maria practically sang through the phone. Brenda Albright tried to enroll her kids in the public summer camp in the next town over. Apparently, they found out about the restraining order and the police report. They have a strict no tolerance for harassment and criminal activity policy. She was rejected. Sarah paused, a slight smile playing